For more on this, I'm joined by the former senior advisor on North Korea under the Clinton administration, Philip Yun. He joins me from San Francisco. Mr. Yun, good to have you on the program. I want to ask you, thank you. I want to ask you what you make of Donald Trump's latest remarks where he says a military option isn't necessarily his first one. Is that even a tiny step backwards in terms of trying to lessen the rhetoric that we've heard around this issue for the last couple of weeks?
Well, I think it's good news. I think it's something that many of us felt that had to happen at some point. And in certain ways, it fits a pattern where you had North Korean provocation, stepped up rhetoric, and then media and concern about possible war. And then suddenly something happens to ratchet it down. That happened in April. It happened in July. Seems this may be one step towards that. The problem is that Donald Trump is all over the place. I mean, it's a credibility issue for him. We know that, as said earlier, the military option is not an option. It's not. And so therefore, that lends, his language is so over the top, it lends to a credibility issue. And then we have to see what China's going to do, because they've always been the wild card in whether they would really enforce the sanctions and do what they say they're going to do.
You were with the Clinton administration, and it was an administration that also wasn't necessarily able to put a stop to North Korea's continued accumulation of nuclear weapons. So Donald Trump's argument is, well, this landed in his lap and now he's got to deal with it. Do you see any upside to the tough talk at all?
So I'll push back a little bit on that. I think there was an agreement in 1994, which for 8 years actually prevented North Korea from producing probably what would have been dozens of nuclear weapons worth of material. So there's a myth out there that the North Koreans have broken every single agreement. And I think the bottom line here is that, we're in a situation where if we don't act soon and figure out a way for a political diplomatic solution, we will be faced with the choice of living with North Korea with a small nuclear arsenal capable of hitting the United States and Canada, or having to use force and risking a war to prevent that from happening. So we've got to move, and we've got to move quickly.
Is it possible, Mr. Yun, that horse has left the barn, though, that the world will have to come to the acceptance that North Korea is now at the nuclear weapons table, albeit in a smaller capacity? But might that be the only way to, appease them without giving them everything?
Well, I think what people have to realize is that North Korea is here to stay. North Korea is not going to go away. They're not going to collapse. The regime seems to be intact. So we're going to have to figure out a way to deal with them. In terms of what's happening here, yes, South Korea and Japan have lived with this reality for quite a while. The United States and Canada, for example, it's not quite there. And so they don't have they at some point will get the capability, but for a threat to actually work, you have to worry about intent. And this is where people have to understand that North Korea knows that if it unilaterally attacked the United States or Canada or anybody else, they would cease to exist. So the idea of deterrence is very much live and strong on the Korean Peninsula and in favor of South Korea, the United States, and our allies.
But the deterrence is, and North Korea knows this, is will the United States stand up for Seoul the way it would stand up for San Francisco? That's the question on the table.
That's part of what Seoul is actually. That is what Pyongyang is trying to do strategically. They're trying to cause doubt in Japan. They're trying to cause doubt in South Korea. And quite frankly, Donald Trump's tweets don't really help a great deal, because in their mind, some South Koreans and Japanese think, well, suddenly the United States is seized with this when they're threatened. But they weren't that concerned when the South Koreans and the Japanese have lived under this threat for quite a while.
Philip Yun, great to have you on the program. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for your perspective.
Thank you.